Before we begin, thank you very much to Shattered Glass TJOmega and his obsession with Armada Sideswipe for joining the Patreon campaign. I like that you singled out Sideswipe there, because I'm well known for not liking Armada Hotshot, but I also very much admit that the worst toy in that line is the Sideswipe. So thank you for making that distinction, and thank you for helping out the channel and doing a little bit of work to keep the channel alive. I do appreciate it. Okay, so I had so many different plans for the video today, but then something big dropped. So now we actually have to discuss this. So, courtesy of Night Shining on Facebook, we actually have some Transformers Prime concept art that has never been seen before. And again, I love how things like this just drop in our laps. It's so cool to actually see undiscovered stuff and be able to talk about the old shows and the old concepts and everything in a completely new light. You know, it's fascinating to see what would have been. So what we have is the original pitch for the show, what it would have been coming off of Transformers Animated and the first two live action movies. And it covers a range between some stuff from the movie, some stuff from the show, some stuff for the toys. And it's fascinating is what it is. So let's take a look and see what we got here, and I'm just going to go over and give my thoughts overall. So we have just like the general pitch stuff. We have the character designs here at the bottom. Those are all just pitches. They're not supposed to be what the final product looked like. I will say the Megatron looks kind of sick. Megatron looks kind of sick, and I kind of like his tank treads just being his legs. I kind of like that. Starscream looking way more traditional than he originally did. And then a few interesting ones. And we'll get to those when we get to the close-ups of those pieces of artwork. But for now, let's take a look a little bit more. Here's the tone of the show. So they wanted real world. They didn't want Cybertron. They wanted to be a realistic world that felt relatable, understandable. High action, vehicle and bot modes. I mean, what else would you do? Thrilling program with edge. Influenced by CW. I don't know. To be honest, like the CW network, what was the... I don't know what the CW is supposed to stand for here. Humor to relieve the tension, balance between the fantastical alien and the everyday human world, sophistication beyond previous series. So most of that I think we got in Prime. For the most part, I think they got the tone that they wanted out of this. I do take a little bit of exception to the fact that they kind of made a backhanded comment at Animated by saying it needed to be more sophisticated. I would argue Transformers Animated is definitely a kid's cartoon, but it does have some nuance and it does have some sophistication in its writing, whereas Transformers Prime boiled down to let's find the Predacon bone storylines. I mean, I don't know if the sophistication really played out as much as they originally wanted it to. You'll also know in the top right corner that originally this was supposed to be called Robots in Disguise. So the name that would eventually be tacked on to its sequel was going to be the go-to name. Remember, this would have been less than a decade out from Robots in Disguise being the name of the 2001 series, which would be a little bit more confusing, even more so than RID 2015. All right, the engagements. Now, at this point, they already knew that they were going to have the aligned continuity, that they wanted everything to mesh together with itself. So they mentioned the video games, the comics, the novels, even the package copy, like even the info on the packaging was supposed to mesh with everything. So they do mention the Activision game. Originally that was in the pitch, that was in the plan. So this is where the whole aligned continuity was supposed to be a thing, and then that obviously did not happen. So we can see the beginnings of Hasbro trying to get all the ducks in a row, and then the ducks just kind of wander off and do their own thing. We do make mention of the video game. So originally the video game is supposed to set up a deeper lore that the new animation can tap into. It kind of did, and then did its own thing. So that didn't really pan out as much as Hasbro planned. Now, if this had all worked, you know, if the novels told these super deep niche stories that kind of filled out the universe, if the video games had set up the base and the origin point of this story, and then we got to see the main conflict and the main story in Transformers Prime, this would have been spectacular. This would have been amazing. And then they didn't. See, video game lets viewers have a immediate and visceral response by playing their favorite characters, lets the viewer know who's been lost for the TF race, build this up in animation. So to kind of play up the stakes and kind of set the universe where it needs to be. Okay, fine. That would have been cool if it had worked. They also mentioned the IDW comic books, which, you know, they were more focused on like little, you know, short stories based on the movies and their own G1-ish continuity at the time. But they never really got into doing aligned comic books. So this one just kind of, this element just fell off completely. We do have a lot of art samples here. So again, we see the original concepts down below. We see what appears to be a Starscream that's kind of gone back to what Transformers Prime, you know, eventually had. We see a Prime and a Bumblebee that are less like they were in the live action movies compared to the artwork from earlier, as well as Megatron regaining normal legs and not treads. And then a lot of everything else is just sampled from other things. You know, you have, you know, what, you know, kind of, you know, what looks like titanium Prowl. But can't quite see where the art is credited on that one. But you also have Alternator, Smokescreen, and Blue Streak, or Silver Streak, or proper. And then, yeah, War for Cybertron designs as well. So you could see they're pulling from a lot of the current and modern aesthetics that everything else was going for, trying to find the style of the series. And you can see the slow process of refinement. All right, so let's take a look. Human characters, we were going to get Spike back. Now, Spike seeks the truth. I have no idea what that's supposed to mean. Suffice to say, it sounds like he was just like, I mean, it flat out says, it's going to say it sounds like he's a rebellious teenager. It flat out says he's a rebellious teenager. So he might just be one of those that just doesn't believe anything at face value until he looks into it. Explains the computer hacking part of it. Always feels like there is a veil being pulled over his eyes. He's paranoid. Prime Spike was going to be paranoid. I mean, full conspiracy nuts kind of paranoid, tinfoil hat, flat earth kind of person? Or is he just, you know, investigative? Because I think there's a distinction. He does find a transformer on Earth. I assume that's because of this investigative nature. Suffice to say, interesting that we're going to get a modernized version of Spike, who wasn't a blue-collar worker or a military guy like the comic books have him. No, he was going to be a teenage hacker, which kind of feels like, you know, it kind of feels like our two you know, lead humans in Prime, you know, kind of split the difference on that one, right? You know, it's like between Jack and Raph. Feels like it anyway. So who else? Who else were we going to get? Now, the poster that started this video actually showed a crew of 6 humans. So we presume one of them would be Spike, and that means the other ones would be from this particular group called Task. I so assume similar to like Sector 7 or Nest, it is basically the government branch of who is dealing with the Autobots at the time. Skeleton crew of military scientists that hope to renew their relationship with the Autobots. Renew is an interesting phrase. That would even indicate that the story might have had something about Transformers on Earth previous to their arrival. And of course, we know that's the case in Prime. You know, Fowler and Unit E and all that is already established before we actually start the show itself. But this sounds like it's something deeper. Like renewing a relationship with the Autobots makes it sound like they had a falling out. So this actually could have had a little bit more depth than what we got in the final show. Highest rated robotic experts, okay, that's obvious, still function to cover up all traces of TF life on the planet Earth while same time studying it. So like Prime eventually did, tried to emphasize the robots in disguise part, which of course that was originally the name of it. acts as aid and foil to Spike, notation, potential love interest. So we would have maybe had a romance angle in the story. We didn't get that in Transformers Prime, and kind of happy they didn't like cram in any shipping. That way it could just be like a story of kids and their robot friends. That's fine. That works for me. It goes to show just like how into the movieverse Hasbro was at the time, when they don't want to go with the traditional formula and they really want to push it far closer to what the live action movies did. You know, they wanted a teen, you know, they didn't want kids with the Autobots, they wanted teenage Spike. So while that is a throwback to G1, he does come across more like Sam than the original Spike. And then of course we have Task instead of Nest. And that all wraps up into kind of like the same little bow that we had in the live action movies at the time. And that's not the end of it. That's not the end of it. So let's discuss this. The humans fight for Earth. I should certainly hope so. While the story is focused on the bots, it is critical that the humans in the story react off of the robot action and each other. This is our planet, and at the end of the day, would you sit back while a war wages around you? Sit back while a war is wages around you. Did you have AI writing this in 2009? What is that line? Afraid to get into the car. Okay. Kind of a fun little concept you can go with there. So you can see where like Spike would be stationed with Task, main computer hacker guy. Typical computer hacker in fiction, especially in the 2000s, just like depicting a guy in front of a wall of monitors that are all completely different sizes and resolutions. Like, this was like the go-to look for a hacker. Like, I mean, and it's hysterical. It is hysterical. And this is like traditional media depiction of like a super hacker. It's not based in reality in any way, shape, or form. It's just a funny thing they always do. It's so weird to think of a Spike character in that role, though. Like, that's a Chip Chase role, if I ever heard it. All right, let's look at actual designs here. So the design for Prime is far more rooted in G1. Though it does, you can see, there are actual elements that push him farther into being a evolution of the War for Cybertron design. You can still see those wheels in the chest that he, in the torso, that he would have had, that would be a little bit closer to where they ended up in the video game model, which is a cool trait. So you could actually see the DNA a lot closer to where the game was. He does have that meatier look to him than Optimus Prime eventually ended up having. Leader of the Autobots, holder of the Autobot Matrix of Leadership, believes all living creatures deserve freedom. So basic stuff there. Let's see. Moving on. Here's where we get interesting. So, the trailer discussion. The trailer discussion, which has nothing to do with a movie preview. Gives mobility and team command post anywhere action is needed. Power up uses use of the Matrix power. So this would have actually been the first time they actively weaponized the Matrix of Leadership. Interesting. What I like about this is that, one, they're actually using the trailer and figuring out things to do with it, but they actually had different ideas that made it a little bit more interesting and toyetic. Once again, we see a version of Optimus Prime here, by the way, that looks far more G1 and does not look like the design we just saw. So keep that in mind. A lot of this was preliminary and changed all the time. But we start seeing artwork of examples of what's going on here. So we've got Bumblebee and unnamed green Autobot in these water packs, swimming away from this huge underwater, presumably Decepticon monstrosity. And then here we have another shot where Cliffjumper seems to have joined them, and Optimus, Bumblebee, and he are all decked out in armor, in like flight armor very based on the finale to Revenge of the Fallen, the Jetfire armor, essentially. So we were going to get a lot of armor power-up stuff, which would have been cool. Would have been really cool toy-wise. And then we have this shot. I thought going through these sequentially for the first time, I thought these were just like completely random concept shots. I think, what are they doing with a laser drill mining for Energon? Also, Jazz is suddenly here. Why is Jazz suddenly here? And who's the green guy behind there? This is the second unknown green guy we have. We'll get to that. So here was the concept. We were actually supposed to get different trailers for Optimus Prime. The idea being that they turned into vehicles or battle platforms once they were detached as a trailer, and then could break down further into being either upgrades for Optimus Prime or minor upgrades and like suits of armor and equipment that multiple Autobot toys could use. So, for instance, here we have like this entire underwater scuba armor thing that, that presumably an Autobot fits inside from the looks of it. But it also had smaller segments that, could just strap on as just like water packs, just like swim pack kind of thing. And then we have things like this, where he gets what looks like Revenge of the Fallen Megatron strapped to the back of him. So that was a thing. Also, the blue striping on the vehicle mode kind of gives me like they want to work in something along the lines of the flames from the movie, but not flames. Kind of gives me that imagery. And then we have the drill again. So the drill has an autonomous mode where it's up on legs and an Autobot can actually pilot it. Then we have the trailer mode, and presumably this would have broken down into, some kind of equipment that attached onto Autobots or powered up Optimus Prime as well. And I do love the idea of this. It actually turns the thing that toy lines try to avoid, the trailer of Optimus Prime, into a completely different toyetic vibe than we were getting before. So you actually had a different play value going on. Now, to sell these at stores, you would either have to repaint the same Optimus Prime every time you made one, or come up with alternatives. I could absolutely see some form of like pipes and huffer being equipped onto the, being able to drag these around too, and still be small enough to interact with them independently, so you didn't need Optimus Prime. I could see where it would get very difficult to market this, however. You're basically selling a box for Optimus Prime that you need the Optimus Prime toy for, and maybe you get a figure that's compatible packed in with it. I do, however, see the DNA here that eventually led into the Cyberverse mini line that Transformers Prime had, because we did have a driller vehicle. We did have mech suits that you could attach, you could drop different like Legion class figures into. So I can definitely see where they tried to retain this as a toy concept, even if it didn't turn out exactly the way they originally planned. So here's a look at Bumblebee, and yeah, he is looking far closer to how he did in the movie. We'll get to that here in a bit. See, he had a mouth, though, so it looks like he actually was going to talk. His youth and exuberance lets him connect with humans, so he's definitely this kind of the same personality we saw in Prime Bumblebee. But it looks like he would have had a working mouth, potentially. Here's where we really need to talk. Ratchet's design is by far the furthest departure. Now, keep in mind where this came from. This would have been pitched right when Hasbro's also considering going for an animated season 4. They told the writers to start throwing pitches around just in case we do renew animated for a 4th season. However, you do need to actually do a few things for us here. So we have that thing that all animation studios and writers love, which is mandates. Hasbro wanted the animated cast to be more in line with the live-action movies. Now, the new video from Kean Carlisle went into depth with this, but it's something we knew about for years, both from interviews and Derek Wyatt's drawings. The idea would have been to have seen Bulkhead leave the main cast, and then he'd be replaced with Ironhide and Jazz. And then the cast itself would not only match the 07 movie, they would also go through redesigns, because we gotta sell more toys, obviously, that would better match the 07 cast. So Ratchet, for absolutely no reason, would decide he wanted to be highlighter color. I don't know why. I don't know why he would come to that conclusion. But you can see from this early pitch that Hasbro was still in that mindset that they had to make the new cartoon, whatever it was going to be, match the '07 movie cast because they wanted it to, because of course that was the big moneymaker. I adamantly disagree with this strategy. I think it worked out way better, especially in the long run, looking back at it, to actually keep, its own design style and aesthetic and offer something different than what was being presented by the movies, rather than just having, can you imagine if we had movies and cartoons running side by side that were all producing the same lime green Ratchet, the same black Ironhide, the same, mute sports car Bumblebee. We already had a glut of sports car Bumblebees that flooded the toy aisles and shelf warmed for years. We didn't need an entire line that did that. So the variety was the best thing they could have done. That was the whole point of animated, to be different from the movies. So why would you do that? And why would you do it with Prime either? So I'm glad they went away from this. That said, I'd still love to see some kind of Ironhide or Ratchet that actually uses that windshield over the face. I would love to see that. It hasn't happened yet. Ironhide, interestingly enough, is the exact same concept that would eventually get a toy in Transformers Prime. In that weird way, he's the only design that actually survived this entire process to actually make it to the toy line itself completely intact. Now, of course, he wasn't in the show, but he had a Cyberverse toy that looked pretty much exactly like this. He had a deluxe in Japan that looked pretty much exactly like this. So good on Ironhide. He made it. He survived. The Megatron design, of course, again, still looks sick. He was not going to be a Cybertronian jet. They're leaning more toward a tank, which, typical of what Megatron is typically these days. I do think it looks really good. I do think it looks really, really wicked. And you can see where some of that design element survived into the Prime design, especially in the spikes on the shoulders. This is a cool design. I'm not going to lie. I kind of wanted this. I kind of want this. And then Starscream's far more traditional. Standard jet, standard color scheme, everything. I definitely think Prime Starscream that we got, vast improvement. And again, offering something different and unique that we can look back on fondly, not just another G1 Starscream, which is kind of how we're screaming at screaming at Hasbro these days. So glad they went with a different direction here. Soundwave, what did they do to you, man? You want to talk being slavish to the live action movies. Here's a Soundwave that wasn't a good design before, and now you've somehow made it worse. So apparently he's going to become some kind of car or truck or something, because you can see fenders and wheels. He's definitely not going to be a satellite, even though he's got the panels from Revenge of the Fallen. He's got the RC triplet thing going on with just having like one unileg and wheels. I don't like it. I really don't like it. You want to talk improvement? Oh my God, this Prime Soundwave is so much better. So much better. Let's see. They were going to use Energon as a visual, to show the glow for powering up weapons, etc. Obviously, that didn't make it into the show. Here, showing it again on Megatron. And that's basically what we got. It's a very different beast. It's kind of weird to think. Like, it's a very obvious step to make a cartoon that's based on a highly successful movie franchise, but it also would have robbed us of so much. I mean, as it is, all of this plotting and planning robbed us of animated season 4, but Transformers Prime is also a really good show, and I think it's good for the things it did differently instead of trying to just be like the movie. If anything, the elements that are like the movie, like Mute Bumblebee, I think is actually more of a detriment to the show. I think it robs it of some opportunity to have its own personality, or, ironically, voice. But it's definitely better than what this would have been. Even though this has some really cool ideas and elements to it, you can see where Hasbro's really stuck on just constantly making more of the live action verse, even at the expense of what the cartoons traditionally are and really should be. So that's a look at what almost was Transformers Prime. It's a fascinating look back. And yeah, just really quick, once again, thanks to Night Shining Games for providing all of this new info. It's great to see this history turn up again. So that's what I got for you today. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Obviously, there is a lot to consider with this one. So I'll leave it to you to do that. And then, who knows what comes next. So, thank you everyone for watching. I will see you next time.
We parlay with the captain.
You think a werecroc is going to listen to elvish rules of piracy?
Of course it would be the freaking elves that invented parlay.
I had to think of a quick replacement for the French.
Oh.